Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be talking about Kael'Thas Sunstrider and his story throughout the Warcraft universe. Since he'll be returning to World of Warcraft with the Shadowlands expansion, I figured it was a good character to do a bit of a lore breakdown on. If that is something you find interesting, do not hesitate to click the like and subscribe buttons. I would greatly appreciate it. Born as a son to King Anasterian Sunstrider, King of Quel'Thalas, Prince Kael'Thas was the heir to the throne of the High Elves, but besides that, also a powerful mage and member of the Six, the shadowy High Council of the Kirin Tor. Despite his status as both Quel'Thalas' royal prince and his place on the Council of Six, Kael'thas proved himself an approachable individual and quickly took to Lady Jaina Proudmoore. His charm and perfectly handsome features impressed the young sorceress, though his regality and her longing for Prince Arthas Menethil had her rebuke his advances, such as traveling to visit the beautiful elven homeland, Quel'Thalas, where magic was even more commonplace than Dalaran. A big rift occurred between Kael'thas and Jaina when she began a relationship with Arthas, and when he spoke of being opposed to the notion of upkeeping the internment camps, viewing the orcs' inability to control their dependency on demon blood as a testament to their lack of formidability as people. As a member of the Council of Six, he was also present when Kel'thuzad was expelled from Dalaran, and after a dramatic turn of events, the treacherous Prince Arthas ravaged his own homeland and led an attack on Quel'Thalas. His brutal conquest of the Elven Kingdom resulted in the utter destruction of Silvermoon City, the Elven capital, the defiling of much of the High Elven forests, and the tainting of the legendary Sunwell, the slaughter of around 90% of the High Elf population, and with that, Kael'thas' father, King Anasterian Sunstrider. Kael'thas learned of this while in Dalaran, and a remorseful Jaina attempted to console him, but he lashed out at her, berating her for her relationship with such a butcher, and made one final allusion to the fact that she had chosen such a monster over him. Cursing humanity and viewing himself as a fool for ever assuming humans would aid him, he stated that his people had thus been reborn, by the blood of those who were forced to serve her beloved in death. With his father gone, Kael'thas knew that leading his people was now his duty alone. He abandoned Dalaran to its fate and rushed to the aid of his people. Once he entered the forest, he sent a message to Lorthamar Theron to inform the elves of the coming of their prince. Organizing the survivors, Kael'thas evacuated as many people as he could and came to burn several defiled forests in an act of scorched earth to spite the Scourge invaders. When he arrived at Silvermoon, it was for an icy reception. His prolonged absence had been noted, and the populace was downtrodden. Fearing the prince would abandon them, Kael first met with Lorthamar, who had rallied the elves in his absence, and was shown the body of his father. There he performed a Thalassian blessing and told his father that he was lost without him, that Anasterian was the king, not him. He asked his father for the strength to lead their people forward, and watched that night as his father was cremated on a funeral pyre. Kael'thas made no excuses for being absent in Quel'Thalas' darkest hour. He resolved to prove himself to the elves, and do whatever he could to rebuild their kingdom. It was hard, and he had always felt distant from his people. They were largely insular and isolated, while he was quite the opposite. Kael'thas then left to observe the defiled Sunwell, and witness the dark, twisted energies pulsating from it. Fearing a further catastrophe upon the elves in the land, and an attack of the Amani trolls, Kael'thas rallied a group of volunteers to destroy the corrupted Sunwell. He took 3 moon crystals with him to this end, all 3 of which survived the sealing of the Sunwell, albeit altered. Kael took them into his possession hereafter. Though he had saved his people from continued exposure to the dark energy, the destruction of the Sunwell resulted in a withdrawal-based lethargy for the Elven race. It was then when Kael'thas renamed his race of shattered people Blood Elves in honor of their fallen brethren and resolved to see Quel'Thalas shine once again. His final act, before rallying his troops to continue the fight the still ravaging Scourge, was that he did not claim the crown from his father. He officially decreed that his father would be the final king of Quel'Thalas. Following the destruction of Silvermoon, Kael began to notice an emptiness within himself and his brethren, an insatiable hunger and disharmony. However, there was no time to deal with that, as Kael had other duties. He and his soldiers were stationed in the Silverpine Forest when a disturbance began to rile up the undead in and around Dalaran. They had begun to raid the outposts Kael had established, so he gathered up his forces to seek refuge in the relative safety of the other side of the river Aravas. As he was loading the supply wagons, he was met by 2 unexpected strangers, Maiev Shadowsong and Tyrande Whisperwind. These night elves had pursued Illidan's Stormrage for 3 days across the sea. Kael guessed that perhaps Illidan was behind the disturbances at Dalaran. When he told them his tale, Tyrande immediately offered her assistance, thinking that he could help them track down Illidan. Maiev believed it to be a waste of time, but reluctantly agreed.
Then we shall lend you our aid, young Kael.
Wait, we have no time for this.
Perhaps once your people are safe, you will help us hunt the demon we seek.
It would be an honor, milady.
With the protection of the Night Elves and their mountain giant allies, Kael quickly made his way to Pyrewood Village to retrieve his buried supply caches. As they gathered more reinforcements, Maiev asked Kael where the rest of his brethren were, and he told them of the destruction of Quel'Thalas. Tyrande empathized, but warned that vengeance and rage was not a pleasant road to walk. As they arrived in Pyrewood, the undead were lying in wait and ambushed the caravan. Kael, Maiev, and Tyrande and their forces battled off the first attackers, but as the second wave advanced, they realized that the caravan would never survive another assault. Maiev and Kael rushed the caravan across the bridge, while Tyrande stayed to fend off the undead alone, as she called upon her powers of Valoon to protect her. The bridge fell away, and Tyrande was swept down the river. Kael wanted to pursue her, but Maiev stopped him, saying that she was a warrior and knew the risks. Maiev then demanded that Kael honored their bargain, and help her capture Illidan.
She's holding them back. We must hurry to save her. That current will take her straight into the heart of the undead lands.
No, Kael. Tyrande is a soldier. She knew the risks she took. We have a greater mission to accomplish now, and our time grows short. Your people are now safe. You will uphold your end of the bargain and help me hunt the demon I seek.
Kael and Maiev tracked Illidan to Dalaran, where Kael's scouts found him performing a strange ritual with a mysterious gem. Malfurion Stormrage came and told them that Illidan's spell was using the Eye of Sargeras to break Northrend apart. Immediately, they advanced upon his location, while Kael defended their bases from the voracious undead. After freeing the paladin Magroth the Defender from the Naga, he pledged to help them. When Illidan's spell was interrupted, Malfurion approached his brother and condemned him for his part in Tyrande's death. Kael, perplexed, suggested that it was premature to assume she was dead, and was vehemently silenced by Maiev. Malfurion, realizing that Maiev had duped him, left her entangled in vines while he and Illidan set off to save Tyrande. Maiev eventually freed herself and set off in pursuit, while Kael'Thas was left in the ruins of Dalaran.
Because of you, Tyrande is dead!
What? Your pardon, Lord Stormrage, but the priestess may still be alive. She was swept downriver, but it's premature to simply assume...
Silence, Kael.
You told me she was torn apart. You lied to me.
The betrayer's capture was our primary concern, Shondo. I needed your help. I knew you would go to her, and we would lose our chance.
Just who is the betrayer now, woman? I must go to her immediately.
Believe me, brother. Despite all our differences, you know that I would never lead Tyrande to harm. Let me help you. My Naga can scour the river for us. Let me do this, at least.
Very well.
What? After all he's done?
After this happened, Kael got orders from the Grand Marshal of the Alliance, Ottmar Garithos, as his commanding officer. It was no secret that Ottmar harbored a poorly hidden disdain for all non-human races. He informed Kael that a strike force was encroaching on Dalaran and that he was going to head them off at the mountains. Kael volunteered his assistance, but Garithos had other plans. He explained that a second force was believed to be approaching from the east, and that was to be Kael's mission. He did as ordered, but when he came to Lordemere Lake, he found the shipyard ruined and had no route across the water. It was then when Lady Vash, a Naga witch, arrived to offer her aid. Citing their common ancestry, Vash provided him with boats, so Kael could continue his mission. When Garithos returned from the front, he condemned Kael for consorting with the Naga, despite the prince's assurances that they were not a threat to the Alliance. Garithos warned Kael that he would not tolerate this treason. He then got sent to deal with an undead presence to the west. When he got there with his elven troops, the undead were quick to overwhelm them. Once again, Lady Vash arrived with her Naga, and though Kael was wary of accepting her offer, she insisted that without her help, he and his brethren would surely fall. Realizing that this was true, he accepted the help, and they achieved victory over the undead. After the battle, Kael told Vash about how his people felt an emptiness ever since Quel'Thalas was destroyed. Vash explained to Kael that just like the Naga, his people were addicted to magic. Without the Sunwell to give them a constant supply of magical energies, they would surely suffer a fatal withdrawal. Kael heard Garithos approaching and bid Vash to flee, but Garithos' men saw the Naga escaping and arrested Kael and his people for treason. Garithos smugly told Kael that he now had all the proof he needed to deal with him and the other elves as he felt they deserved, and he had them all imprisoned in the dungeons of Dalaran.
I can't explain it exactly, but ever since our homeland was destroyed, my brethren and I have felt empty, almost drained of our spirit. There is a hunger now that has hardened our hearts.
I know this hunger, Kael. Like us, your people are addicted to magic. It flowed through your veins for over 10,000 years. And now, with the corruption of your land and the sunwell that empowered you,
We have been cut off from our power, from our birthright. Without a new source of magic, my people will surely die.
there are other founts of power in this world, Kael. Demons, for instance.
You speak of madness, my lady. We will never be that desperate.
Your aversion is understandable, but still.
Prince Kael, Grand Marshal Garithos has arrived. He has brought a full battalion with him.
Damn. Vosh, you'd best leave. I cannot guarantee your people's safety.
Naga warriors! Forget about them!
So, Kael, you've shown your true colors at last. I knew you were in league with those serpents. Now I have all the proof I need to execute every traitorous one of you.
Vash crept in through the sewers of the dungeon and freed Kael, and then helped him free his brethren. Vash promised him an escape from his human oppressors through Kel'Thuzad's interdimensional portal, where her master, Illidan, was waiting on the other side. As they neared the exit, Kael met his former comrade, Jailer Kassan, who he was forced to slay in order to escape. Upon leaving the dungeons, the Blood Elves and Naga fled through the portal Archimonde used to enter the world of Azeroth, and into a new world.
All right, men, pull back! Back to the portal!
Now, young prince, we take one final step towards destiny.
Kael found himself on the barren lands of the Hellfire Peninsula, and Vash revealed that this outland was once the Orcus homeland of Draenor. They searched for Illidan for days, until Vash caught a familiar scent on the winds. Maiev had captured Illidan, and was escorting him back to her base in a prison wagon. Kael and Vash's forces quickly rushed into the fray and battled Maiev's army in order to retrieve the unconscious Illidan, and return him to their base, where they could undo the magical lock that kept him caged. Illidan was pleased with the tenacity of all of his servants, new and old alike, and told them the situation of Outland. To flee from his vexed master, Kil'jaeden, Illidan had fled to Outland only to find it overrun by Magtheridon and the Fel Horde, an army of Fel Orcs, reinforced by demons arriving through Ner'zhul's dimensional gates. Kael had hoped Illidan might be able to cure the Blood Elves of their addiction to magic, and asked if he could help them. He sadly told him that there was no cure for their condition, but promised Kael that if he joined him, he would provide the Blood Elves with enough magical energies to keep their hunger sated forever. Upon hearing this, Kael pledged his loyalty to Illidan Stormrage.
You were right to come to me, Kael. I share the pain of your addiction, your hunger for magic.
Can you help us, Lord Illidan? Can you cure us?
There is no cure, young one. But there are ways to feed the hunger. Follow me, and I will grant your people more magic than they can imagine.
So be it. Lord Illidan, my fellow Blood Elves and I humbly pledge ourselves to your service.
Then arise, young Kael. You shall be my right hand, and the harbinger of my wrath.
Kael and Vash protected Illidan as he went about closing the interdimensional portals. He then discovered the camp of Draenei, being assaulted by orcs, and lent them his aid. He was greeted by Akama, the Elder Sage, who offered his allegiance to Illidan. Finally, the time came to assault Magtheridon's Black Temple. Illidan, Kael, Vash, and Akama all led their forces against Magtheridon's fortress, infiltrating it, and finally defeating him in his own throne room. As Illidan stood triumphant, Kil'jaeden descended from the fiery sky and rebuked Illidan for his insolence in trying to hide. The demon gave him one last chance to save himself, destroy the frozen throne, or face his eternal wrath.
Foolish little mongrel. You failed to destroy the frozen throne as I commanded. And still you thought to hide from me in this forsaken backwater. I thought you to be more cunning, Illidan.
Kil'jaeden, I was merely set back. I was attempting to bolster my forces. The Lich King will be destroyed. I promise you.
Indeed. Still, these servitors you've gathered show some promise. I will give you one last chance, Illidan. Destroy the frozen throne, or face my eternal wrath.
Kael and his new allies returned to Northrend, where they were immediately met by Anubarak and his troublesome race. Though they kept them at bay, And with that, Illidan's forces slowly advanced on the Icecrown Glacier. The Blood Elves, thirsty for vengeance, attacked the newly arrived Arthas in a large-scale Dragonhawk ambush. Arthas was able to push them back with the help of his Erubian ally Anubarak, and was greeted by a familiar sight, Kael'Thas, brandishing a reforged fellow Malorn, his family weapon. And after a heated exchange, Arthas charged the Elven Prince, though Kael'Thas teleported out of the fray for the time being. Arthas fled into Azjol Nerub, and after his ascent out of it, Kael'Thas attacked him once more. The two appeared to be fairly evenly matched, fellow Malorn providing an adequate counter to the mighty Frostmourne. However, the tides began to turn, and despite Kael's vicious assault of both powerful fire spells and fellow Malorn's precision, Kael'Thas was pushed back by Arthas. Knowing that he could not win this battle, Kael once again teleported himself away, deeming that he had bought Illidan enough time. Although Kael successfully withdrew, his family blade was lost in the battle. After a fierce battle between Arthas and Illidan, Illidan's twitching body was tossed to the ground. Kael and Lady Vashj were left leaderless on the snowy slopes of Icecrown as Arthas claimed his destiny. Together they took Illidan's unconscious body, and they fled back to Outland. And what happened after they fled back to Outland, we'll have to find out in the next video. Kael'Thas, his story is pretty deep and in-depth, and instead of making one large video, I decided it's better to make two shorter ones, so hopefully you don't mind this decision too much, and I'll see you again in the next video in 2 days. I appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you're new around here, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.